Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham. I'm joined today by Colin Camper. On this week's show, we're going to dive into the happenings of UFC 196. We're also going to talk a little Bellator 151, World Series of Fighting 29, Invicta 16, and of course, as Colin has there, right there on his nice Zooty, Glory 28, happening this weekend in Paris on ESPN3, as well as the UFC Fight Pass for the Super Fight Series. Once again, as I mentioned, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. And Colin Camper runs our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. Please like it today. How's it going today, Colin?
It's going well. It's late, but there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about, indeed. Of course, we have a lot to cover with UFC 196 and, of course, all the possible scenarios that come out of that event, which include what should be blockbuster huge UFC 200 coming up in July. We'll get to that to end our show. We're going to start first with Bellator. Of course, that happened this past weekend, Bellator 151. Relatively unexciting so far for the four-fight main card. In fact, watching it, Colin, it felt like I was watching the exact same fights 3 times in a row. That's kind of what it felt like between the Ty Manglo Kakai fight, the Yamauchi Jenkins fight, as well as the Gonzalez and Gilbert Smith. They were all close decisions, all could have went kind of both ways, but nothing super impactful happened in any of those fights.
Yeah. When you get to like a certain level, sometimes it'll just happen where the matchups lay out, and when a guy wants to win, they're willing to. I don't want to say play it safe, but they know the point game. And a lot of these guys are point game fighters. So, I mean, that's just kind of how it happened over the past day for that fight event.
Now, of course, Gonzalez is known for being a finisher, but Gilbert Smith took this fight on, I believe they said, like 2 weeks' notice. Completely different opponent to what Gonzalez was supposed to be originally taking, a lot more grappling based. So I think that kind of changed Gonzalez's approach. And obviously, Gilbert Smith, that's kind of what he's known for. Jenkins, I'm not too surprised. Yamauchi, he had his chance there, I think, in the first round when he jumped on Jenkins' back. But after that, Jenkins decided, maybe I shouldn't stand with this guy. He'll do something crazy like that. I just got to go to my bread and butter. Maybe it's going into waters that's unfamiliar with me, but at least I'll lose on my terms. And I think that's what he did. And Yamauchi, because of all that submission background, maybe a little overconfident in his submission skills, and that allowed Jenkins to come back and win rounds 2 and 3. And in the process, a huge win, and it really shoots him up Bellator's stacked featherweight rankings.
Yeah, I know Bubba Jenkins is definitely making himself a little bit of name over there in featherweight. And he's definitely a standout guy. He knows how to win where he needs to win. So, I mean, like I've said before, I'm a fan of Bubba Jenkins. I like him. He's a fun fighter. So, I mean, but unfortunately for the past night, not a lot of fans who were casuals coming off of that Kimbo Slice wave still and everything were introduced to the very fun and exciting aspect of some of these fighters.
Now, of course, Fernando Gonzalez, like I said, short notice against Gilbert Smith, just pulls out the split decision. This is now his 5th win in a row for Bellator in the welterweight division, and they got no shortage of contenders. Obviously, Ben Henderson kind of jumps the line as the new signing, taking on Andrei Korzhakov. Of course, you have the former champion Douglas Lima. You have Brendan Ward out there, as well as Michael Venom Page, all still kind of hovering around. And then here sits Fernando Gonzalez, Paul Daly, forgot about him. And then you have Fernando Gonzalez sitting there at 5 consecutive wins. And, he kind of gets overshadowed because the other guy's prestige and name and kind of maybe even finishing ability, and Gonzalez has just as much claim as to a Bellator title shot as maybe anyone else in the organization.
Yeah, it's interesting because right now welterweight over there has now that new bump with Benson, and I feel like if Benson can get past like a guy like Korzhakov and maybe like another fighter, I feel like he may shut that division down. So Fernando, honestly, his best chance might be coming in as a dark horse to this, because not a lot of people are throwing his name up there as contender because we have so many big names that you can match with Henderson, with Venom Page and Daly, and possibly even a rematch with any of those names up there if a fight goes crazy. So Gonzalez, his best chance might be just, wade those waters, pick off a guy when he loses a fight, and just slowly Rory McDonald his way to the title shot.
Of course, he was supposed to take on Michael Venom Page, and you wonder if he beat no offense to Gilbert Smith, I think, who is a solid competitor, but
Right.
if he beats Michael Venom Page, that maybe kind of shoots him up quicker. And it's a disappointment for Gonzalez that he wasn't able to get that matchup. Now, hopefully maybe that materializes later in the year, or maybe Gonzalez we haven't heard anything with Douglas Lima since losing the welterweight title. I think that'd be a heck of a scrap if Gonzalez can take a rebounding Lima and you can make a case the winner right back into the thick of things.
Yeah, I think a rematch there, or just even a fight with that, would just be great. And then you could even have Venom Page and Daly, which would be a crazy step up for Venom Page,
especially if they do that card in England. They're supposed to do.
Man, could you
easily
imagine?
The main event?
Yeah, that'd be pretty fantastic. I mean, even if Page and Daly didn't end up fighting each other, even on the same card, that's enough fireworks to even get the English fans going. So, Bellator, their welterweight divisions, it's not like UFC caliber, but it's still pretty
They got some names.
They got some decent names on decent tears.
It's way better than like their middleweight divisions.
Right,
just
exactly.
One division up.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the main event, which was the only fight that made you go, wow. And that was Darian Caldwell, the young kid here, 8-0 coming in against the longtime veteran, former 2-division tournament winner and champion Joe Warren, kind of the old guard of wrestling against the new guard here in Darian Caldwell. And the interesting stat, I didn't know this going in, and apologize for not doing my homework, but coming into this match, Darian Caldwell, if he didn't finish you in the first round, all his other wins were decision. And that maybe bodes well for Joe Warren, who you got to catch him early, because if you wait around, Warren usually wins decisions. If you look at Warren historically in his career, in fact, I believe he only has one decision loss. I'm going to double check that here, and he actually has no decision losses. So if it goes to the scorecards, it's usually in favor of the man originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So with that in mind, I don't know if Caldwell tried to soup it up or if it's just the way it worked out, but you could tell, like we said, coming in, that the size would be a huge issue. If Caldwell could go in there and assert his size, much bigger and stronger than Joe Warren, he could do the job. And that's exactly what he did, highlighted by that huge suplex he gave the former Greco-Roman world champion. He was able to use that transition, take Warren's back, and sink in the rear naked choke to get the first round win. And in the process, originally this was supposed to be a number one contenders match. Now with Galvo and Dantes once again getting delayed, Caldwell will either have to wait, or maybe he takes on another tough guy in the bantamweight division. I think it's up to Caldwell. And obviously if I'm Caldwell, sure, you want your title shot, but sitting 9-0, you're still young in your career. I would take another fight.
Definitely.
You're still one of Bellator's bigger stars. A loss doesn't really put you that far down. If you can get a fight against another top bantamweight fighter, which Bellator does have a few guys still left on the roster, Rafael Silva would maybe a nice test, but I think if you're Caldwell, I'd take a fight, because who knows when that Dantes Galvo thing happens, or at least be preparing for a fight, because if and when Galvo or Dantes, they both have taken turns bouncing out of the fight, maybe you get that call to fill an injury replacement. If you're already training for a fight,
be ready. Yeah,
boom, you're inserted, and then you could get that title sooner rather than later.
Yeah, Darren Caldwell, he's definitely making waves. Like you said, it'd be best just take a fight and be ready to just bounce off the bench at any moment. Right now he's an explosive dude. He's been wrestling like his whole life. Shane Carwin was talking about him the other day, back when he was in NCAA. Just the heart and determination from this kid, put in sheer work. He's a wrestler. He's not foreign to just being in shape and ready to fight at any time. So I feel like the best thing right now is, while you're young and you're coming off a big win like Joe Warren, just get yourself signed for the next fight. Keep that training going. Keep that momentum. Start just getting some experience, because if and when you fill in for that title shot, or you get the title shot, you want to have as much under your belt as you can. And I think Caldwell's just got enough of a good wrestling base to really make a big statement. And I feel like for him, it pays to just be ready, get that really comfortable, let it settle in really hard. Because nine wins isn't bad. But when you go to championship quality fights and everything, and you're a wrestler, you want to get that MMA wrestling, so to speak, where you let your wrestling abilities from your childhood transition to the sport of MMA. You want that to be well grown into the sport. You want to get everything tuned up, so now like, okay, in wrestling, instead of doing this because it's MMA, I might want to do this just because of the difference. But definitely, I have to agree, take a fight, get the experience, just keep going. I mean, because even at this young age, taking a loss, I feel like wouldn't set him back too hard because he's still pretty entertaining and explosive.
And he, like I said, Bellator, I think, has invested a lot in him, and I don't think they would drop him that quickly. Now, for Joe Warren, 39 years old, another loss to a top competitor. You know, he's not going to go down as one of the greatest of all time in terms of MMA. He still wants to make the 2016 USA Olympic team. I would say, Joe Warren, I would say focus on that. If you get the Olympics, great. If you don't, you don't. But as far as MMA goes, regardless of the organization, I don't think there's really left for Joe Warren to accomplish. I mean, as far as Bellator goes, and who knows what will happen in Bellator even 5 years from now, winning 2 titles in 2 different divisions for a major organization is nothing to scoff at. Right. And I think for Joe Warren, he's had a pretty successful career. And, you know, he burst onto the scene kind of late in his athletic career over in Japan, and he's had a nice little career here, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, now you're 39 years old, and you know, time to look at the next stage of your career.
He's kind of like Matt Serra. Matt Serra came in, you know, he's an athletic young guy and everything. Came in, won the belt, had his moment for a second, lost it, and just wasn't the same. He had a couple wins there, a couple losses, and eventually, you know, the sport passed him by. And that's what's happening with Joe Warren. I mean, and he's a great dude, but like you said, he's not a legend. He's not a Hall of Famer, but he definitely did a lot to help Bellator's bantamweight division and everything. And so I feel like for him, it's either take whatever few fights you want left, get on the Olympic team, or, you know, maybe start think about hanging it up. You're getting old.
You know what I would think, and I do like Jimmy Smith as the color commentator for Bellator, but you know, Sean Grant, like I said, he has a great voice. He's still learning like the game of mixed martial arts, but I wouldn't mind Grand, Smith, and Joe Warren in the booth. I think Joe Warren would fit in pretty nice with those two in the Bellator
like celebrity
booth.
Thing.
Maybe not every fight, but maybe some of the big. I think he could easily transition.
With Couture,
yeah, I think he can transition easily to Bellator's booth, and that gives him some credibility to show, hey, this was one of our top guys. You know, they can start kind of like a legacy program, so to speak.
It's a great way for a guy who loves the sport so much and invests so much into your company to really give him a chance to still give to that company without having to put his health on the line.
Exactly.
You know, so we'll see what happens.
All right, let's transition to some fights coming up. We'll stick with MMA for just a second. World Series of Fighting 29 will be this weekend in Colorado, while not his hometown in Arizona, which they've had a couple of fights. Justin Gaethje now primarily trains out of Denver, Colorado, so kind of a hometown fight for him as he puts the title on the line against Brian Foster, who's, of course, coming off the loss and the 2 wins all in one night for that 8-man one-night tournament that they had not too long ago. Brian Foster came out of it. Has fought for a lot of adversity, used to be in the UFC at one time, got injured, fell in some rough times, was losing in local shows, has battled back, and is now sitting 1 fight away from becoming a world champion in World Series of Fighting, and he's taking on arguably the best fighter, maybe not signed to a UFC contract, and I firmly believe that's Justin Gaethje, the highlight, as he's just dominated and decimated everybody the World Series of Fighting has put forth with some incredible power, I think some good conditioning, some good wrestling, and I don't know, just a charisma I don't know what it is. Just Justin Gaethje always comes to form. There's never been a boring Justin Gaethje fight, and with Brian Foster added into that element, I think we're going to see a fantastic main event here for World Series of Fighting at 29, regardless of what happens with the rest of this main card.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Gaethje is basically almost carrying the World Series on his shoulders right now. I mean, but he's a super exciting fighter. He's incredibly talented. He's a cool guy. You know, he's easily likable and everything. I mean, I think the fight that won a lot of people over is his fight with Nick Newell, which was a really weird fight for some people. They kind of watch because of Newell's, you know, crippled, not crippled, handicap. There we go. I couldn't think of the word. But the way he handled himself after the fight and everything, because I mean, going into a fight like that, you're almost rigged. Like, it's like a lose-lose almost. Like, you beat the guy. It's like, well, you beat a dude who, even though he's legitimate, casual fans can say, oh, you beat a guy with one arm. But if you lose, which you very well could have, Nick Newell's a deadly dude, then it's like, oh, you lost a guy with one arm. And it's not so much as hardcore fans saying, it's just like in the casual eyes, when you're carrying something like World Series on your back, you know, he took that fight. He won it very convincingly. but the way he handled himself afterwards was really professional, and he just carried himself with like this new like thing, like, hey, you know what, I'm going to carry on this legacy, and I'm going to take this sport and really just put this belt on my back. I mean, and the dudes he fought, I mean, right after Newell, I mean, he took on Gillard, which was crazy, and then Palomino twice was
incredible fights.
Crazy.
And then his first ever fight in World Series of Fighting was against Jay-Z Cavalcante. If you can believe that, which Cavalcante still at the time, this was back in almost 3 years ago, actually, was still pretty relevant and still one of the better non-UFC lightweights out there. And he was able to knock him out in the first round.
Yeah.
I know it was via doctor stoppage, but that was he was a super underdog in that fight against Cavalcante.
He's had such a good career. I mean, and he's got the O on him, which right now it's a coveted spot in a lot of fighters. There's not many dudes out there who have that O. You know, even in the UFC,
right?
There's only like 3 fighters that are like even in the spotlight that have an O on their name. And so
great finishing rate, 13 of 15 wins by finish, with 12 being by knockout. And this guy was an all-American wrestler coming into it. You wouldn't, and he's huge for the weight class at 5'11".
Yeah.
He's still young, 27. That if and when he does get to the UFC, which I think will happen again, like I said, training out there in Denver with Grudge with so many UFC athletes, I think it's only a matter of time before he goes over. And I firmly believe he can compete with the who's who of that 155 division.
It's going to be tough for World Series if they lose him to the UFC, just because World Series needs talent.
They do, but you know, eventually, you know, if he gets by a guy like Brian Foster, it's kind of like, well, there's only so many more guys they can offer him.
So yeah.
All right. Well, World Series, the rest of the card is not that great, so I'm not going to even bother it. Just tune in. Tyson Nam, once upon a time, was a thing when he beat Eduardo Dantes down in Brazil. But other than that, since at least coming to the World Series of Fighting, has been relatively lackluster. He's on the card, but stick for that main event. At least watch that main event there on the NBC Sports. All right, let's get to also this weekend Invicta action on the UFC Fight Pass. That will be on the 11th, which is Friday, featuring Akia Hamasaki against Amber Brown. I believe that will be for the Atomweight Championship. Also for the interim Flyweight Championship, Vanessa Porto will now take on Jennifer Maia. Angela Hill is also on the card, making her Invicta debut against Stephanie Aging. I think that's going to be an incredible matchup there. Two excellent strikers in the strawweight division. Jessamine Duke returns to Invicta as she will take on Irene Alda. You also have another big matchup, 2 big matchups at flyweight, as you have Roxanne Modafferi against Deanna Bennett, as well as Andrea Lee against Sarah D'Elio. And Aspen Ladd also was added against Killer Kelly McGill. This is just going to be a very excellent card here for Invicta 16. I think one of the better cards they've had in a while, and perfect debut for their first time in the fight capital there in Las Vegas.
Yeah, this almost seems like a super card almost. I mean, it's a really, really good card. I mean, and for those listening, if you've never watched an Invicta fight, get on Fight Pass, take the week trial, and just watch this card. It's guaranteed to deliver. I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot and jinx it now, but Invicta fights, they're pretty exciting, and usually the cards will have like 3 or 4 really solid good fights. This is a card that looks like pretty much every fight's going to be a really solid and exciting one. And it's going to put out a couple new possible contenders in there. It's going to be exciting to see how Angela Hill does over there, especially against Egging, who had an incredible fight. Roxanne is doing wonderful, but Deanna Bennett is insane. So no matter which way this goes, this is a very, very good card. The women over there have pretty solid records. I mean, Jessamine Duke, she's having a hard time where she's at even, but she's not a bad fighter. It's just generally she's pulling decent talent against her, and so it's like either she's going to win it or she's going to lose it. But they're still all exciting. So
actually, I was wrong. It is not their first event in Vegas. That apparently they did one other event, so my apologies on that.
The first we remember.
The first in a while. I can tell you it's been a long time since they've been to Las Vegas. Mainly they've been holding events in Kansas City, but it looks as though they're going to be moving away from doing as many events in Kansas City. So, like I said, the atomweight title will be the main event, interim flyweight title there. I think Bennett actually was supposed to fight in there for the interim flyweight title, but I guess they kind of switched a couple of things around. And to be honest, I kind of like it. No offense to Deanna Bennett. We've had her on the show, but she's coming off that loss for the strawweight title. Yeah. So I did find it a little bit odd that they all of a sudden then put her in for the, albeit interim, but right away, I guess, for another title shot, because she did get finished in that strawweight fight. It wasn't like a close 5-round decision or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it kind of speaks more towards just where they're trying to get names going and everything. But, I mean, when you got Alexa Grasso up there fighting.
Oh, I forgot. Alexis Grasso is on the card, too.
Oh, my God.
Or, no, that was supposed to be Alexis Grasso against Stephanie Enging, but now Angela Hill is filling in.
I was about to say,
That's
like,
right.
Wait a minute. Angela Hill
so it was even going to be, I mean, it's still a good replacement having Angela Hill, but Alexa Grasso was even supposed to be on here.
Angela Hill's actually a really good kickboxer, too. So that's actually an exciting fight to see. So next time they come around, if they come to Kansas City, we should make a trip to one.
Hopefully. All right, let's get to Glory 28 Paris. That's coming up this weekend. Super Fight Series, that's the undercard that's going to be shown on the Fight Pass, but then the main card will be on ESPN 3 live on Friday night, and then to catch the replay of the main card, you can go to ESPN 2 on Sunday night and watch it. So you can watch it 2 different ways, and I believe it's available usually a week or 2 after the fight on ESPN 3 if you forget to set your DVR on Sunday night or you miss it live there on Friday night, and they got an amazing card. At least we'll start first with the Super Fight Series that's going to be on the Fight Pass, which features 2 title fights. That's right, 2 title fights. The first one up coming in their light heavyweight division, as Saulo Calvari will put his light heavyweight championship on the line as he takes on Artem Vakalov. And this should be a very excellent fight here. In fact, this is a rematch. Carvalho actually beat Vakalov back at Glory 20 in Dubai just about a year ago. Vakalov was able to, Vikatov rather, was able to come back and beat Luonga at Glory 25 back in November to try to get a rematch at the light heavyweight championship. And since that win at Glory 20, just the one that was actually at the Dynamite card, as Calvari defeated Zach McQuesca at the Dynamite card in September. So it's been a while since both guys fought. But that's the main event of the Fight Pass card. And then, of course, we have the featherweight title, which I think could be fight of the night, as the champion Adam Chuck takes on Armrani, a.k.a. the Jaguar. And, of course, he earned his shot after winning the tournament there in Milan. Oh, I'm sorry, rather Amsterdam, defeating Chi Bean Lim as well as Megtalk Yurk, knocking both gentlemen out, I believe, in the second round, and looking like he didn't even get touched in those combined like 3 rounds, basically. Right. And no offense to Adam Achuk, who, of course, is the champion. He's undefeated in Glory, but I don't know if he's faced a guy quite like Armrani. And I'm not sure if Armrani can hold his title much. I'm not saying he can't win, but I'd be very surprised if the Jaguar doesn't leave Paris with the belt around his waist.
Yeah, no, the Jaguar, I mean, first of all, the dude looks insane. He has like something about his face is looks really intimidating. And that aside, even if Chuck manages to defend, he's still got a couple dudes lined up that he's gonna have to defend against. By the time, even if he gets through all those defenses, he could still probably end up seeing the Jaguar probably once or twice again inside that mix of defenses. I mean, especially the fight we saw with Giga, a couple weeks ago and everything, that could even end up thrown in there. And it's like the mix right now for that title is super exciting, and there's a lot of good fights to come out of that.
And of course, one other fight I want to highlight in Glory's kind of stacked middleweight division as well. Jason Wilness, he's coming off that short notice loss to Joe Schilling back at Glory 24. He steps back into the ring as he will take on Philippe Verlinden, who so far has had a rough go in Glory, just 5-5, losing his last 2 fights. His last fight was all the way back in June against Murad Bazidi, of course, just speaking Glory, but overall has a pretty solid record as well. And this is his chance to kind of get back into the swing of things. Even though Wilness lost actually his last 2 fights, they're to Joe Schilling and Simon Marcus, so no slouches there. And, win by either guy kind of puts him back in the thick of things of this very, like we said, crowded middleweight division for Glory.
Yeah, middleweight's just kind of ridiculous for Glory right now. There's so many dudes just kind of pushing their way up there, especially with Dustin with the statement he made the other night. So I think this is a great free card for folks to catch on Fight Pass. Free. I think Glory's doing something right here, putting these super fights out for people to see, because it's going to get some good exposure to divisions that are super exciting right now.
All right. Now, while the lightweight title, I think, will be on the line next month in Copenhagen, they're already getting set to determine the next number one contender with a 4-man tournament. And I have to say the tournament favorite's probably Saichachi Sitsong Piyong coming out of Thailand. Of course, he just lost a super close fight to the current lightweight champion, Robin van Hoosmalen, back in Glory 25 in November in Milan, which myself, and I believe you as well, Colin, thought that the man from Thailand had won the title.
Definitely.
But the judges went the other way and stuck with the champion, so he has to be the favorite entering this lightweight tournament. Was also features David Karia out of Georgia. So far, rough go of it in Glory with a 5-5 record. One time sitting at top of the rankings, and has bounced between weight divisions.
Look at those losses
as well.
though.
But
so it's like,
losing to Van Hoosmalen, I think that's when he lost the title, and of course losing to Sitson Piyong back in June of last year. And I believe that is that's going to be the first matchup, so rematch. So that one's going to be really good. And then we have our other two competitors, Murat Gregorian coming out of Belgium. So far, just 1-2-1 in Glory, coming off of 2 losses. And again, not bad guys coming off to Adam and Chuck, who we know is the featherweight champion, and Van Hoosmalen. So it's also been a while since he's fought in Glory, not since Glory 22. And Colby Dijame, he's only had 1 fight in Glory, lost to Josh Jancy, getting knocked out. That was at Glory 22. So he's probably the dark horse here of this tournament. But I think we're going to see a pretty solid tournament. And I think Sitsong Piyong, his style, using those nice, traditional Thai low kicks, which we don't see as many guys use in Glory. They really like to throw the body in high kicks. I think that bodes well because he's not using as much energy. He kind of sticks to that strategy. And I think as far as a long tournament straight, that may give him the benefit. Now, unfortunately for him, he probably has the tougher guy to go against in Carrara first, as opposed to taking on Gregorian or Dijame.
Yeah, well, I think almost this kind of feels like a replay of the tournament we just watched the other week, where we have Jime, who is basically that little Canadian guy who was kind of the dark horse over the middleweight tournament. We have Gregorian, who's basically a guy, the little Canadian, I forgot his name already. Apologies to him. And and then we have the 2 dudes who've kind of like already had a history together and everything. And
with Barrett and Jacoby, now we have right.
And it's just like, it's kind of like the blueprint's already laid out that it's looking good for Sit. I mean, he's already fought Kira, and so it's like,
and he's beat him.
He's already fought the champion currently. He already knows kind of this, and he has a huge wealth of experience. Whereas his toughest fight is his first fight of the night, which looks good for him,
so.
So which I think his toughest fight of the tournament will be his first fight, and then regardless of how that other fight goes between Gregorian and Jime, it's like, Sit, if he takes a win there, honestly, the second fight, a wealth of experience might do him the best there, because these other guys aren't. I don't think they're going to bring the wealth of experience that Sit would, just because he's fought all the people that he's already known.
And I feel like he didn't even need to do this tournament. I feel like he should have got an instant rematch at Robin, but that's kind of how it goes in Glory. And he seems to be a guy. He's like, well, all right, I'll go back. I'll win a tournament. Come back. I'll beat him again.
I mean, that's how he got his record. He's just going in there and he's
when you rack up a record of 106, 29-5, you're willing to play anytime, anywhere.
So you're taking 2 fights a night, 3 fights a night, maybe 4 in a weekend. So, hey.
The featured fight, Myrtle Groenhart, comes back after a very close decision loss to Nicky Holtzkin at Glory 26. He's taking on Cedric Doumbé, who just only has 1 fight in Glory against Congo, who's now coincidentally going to be fighting Nicky Holtzkin coming up for the welterweight championship. So while Doumbé has a chance to win, I think this is a fight to get Groenhart back on a win. And honestly, I think if Groenhart can win, I think he maybe gets another shot at Nicky Holtzkin.
Definitely. I mean, if there's anything evident, looking at records and glory, is that one, it's easy to be a fan, and two, it's easy to get a title shot. And that's not saying that their title shots are like, oh, anyone can just get one. It's just generally for each weight class, it's roughly about the same 5 guys who put up a good win streak.
Exactly.
And they all tend to fight each other like at least once or twice a year. And so jumping in, you could just scroll through anyone's fight history and just start connecting dots with names. I mean, we just connected like 17 dots in like 3 different weight classes. So, I mean, for him, you know, the fight, it's big, it's important, and it can just throw you right back in there, no problem. So,
but the guy I'm most excited to see, and there's a reason he's the main event, Rico Verhoeven. He's so far has been the most dominant fighter in glory in any weight class so far, racking up a glory record of 10-1, winning 9 consecutive glory fights in a row. And as of late, you know, if you look at the start of his career, you think, oh, he has a lot of decisions, but he's turned it on as of late, knocking out 2 out of his last 3 opponents and knocking out Ajabuji in his last fight in his home country of the Netherlands in the first round. Verhoeven is an absolute monster, and no offense to his opponent from, I believe it's Russia, in Maldlan Brestovic, but I wouldn't want to face Verhoeven right now. He is on an absolute tear.
Verhoeven's a monster.
I'm sorry, Croatia, not Russia.
Yeah,
I got
Croatia.
the flag. I got the flags mixed up.
They're the right next.
It looks close to a Russian flag. In my defense,
I think they run the same style of government now. Yeah, Verhoeven's just a different beast right now. He's just one of those names you throw out there. It's like, I don't want to sit here and start comparing him to like crazies like Anderson Silva and stuff. But at this moment in his career, that's kind of where he's at right now. It's just he's super keyed in and just like focused on what he's going to do and how he does it. And I think the biggest aspect of him is that he's got a couple rematches on his record, but each one you'll see the rematch, and you'll see the first fight, you'll see the rematch, you'll see the rematches end sooner. You know, and it's because he knows now he could just write people in, and I think he's just really good at just knowing what people are going to do and just reading it and just coming out with a really killer strategy. And this is no offense to Brestovic, but dude,
good luck.
You have very little experience compared to this guy, and I'm not saying like, oh man, everyone has a puncher's chance. Everyone could just come with a game plan and just stomp face. And his overall boxing experience or kickboxing experience, it's basically equal with Verhoeven. However,
Verhoeven's been doing it in glory.
You've been doing exactly when you're on the big stage, you're doing like this against, you know, Verhoeven's been doing it against consistent good talent in rematches and everything too. So he's steel sharpens steel. And when he's fighting live matches with guys who are just as dangerous as him and he's been winning, he's just getting better. Whereas Brestovic is like, you know, you've had 2 fights in glory. You know, it's like, you fought, you know, some like a similar guy with Verhoeven, but that's it. 2 fights. It's not like you have 7, you know, so it's like, you got to get these jitters ready, man, because you're going against a
He's
beast.
coming.
Yeah.
He's coming for you. All right. Let's get to the big fight that happened this weekend. Enough previewing. Let's get to what happened. UFC 196. Let's get starting first. Real quick, a quick look at the undercard. Diego Sanchez returns to lightweight, gets a win over Jim Miller in a battle of who sticks around for at least 1 or 2 more fights.
Right.
Between 2 longtime veterans. Darren Elkins once again beats a lower to mid level featherweight. Dominates him.
Darren Elkins.
So we'll see. Maybe he gets another good guy. Probably loses to him. So let's see. I mean, Darren Elkins has a lot of talent, but so far against the big names, he has not.
I want to give a shout out to Teruto Ishihara. First fight of the night. I'm sticking with my statement earlier that
That's
Japanese
true.
guys have been having a hard time getting there, and he came out in a really good fight
against Julian Rosa, coming off a pretty good Ultimate Fighter run.
Yeah,
I thought
actually, and he had a really good knockout. He just seemed really charismatic and a really nice, flashy dude. Definitely a name to look out for.
Speaking of going downhill in your career, Eric Silva gets knocked out by Nordin Talib in the 2nd round, and as quick as maybe he rose, maybe this may be the end of Eric Silva, at least in the UFC.
Yeah, you know, I'm not throwing accusations around, but after USADA came in like full force, Eric Silva just has not been the same, and he's taken some really hard losses. I think it really started with the Matt Brown fight. I think that's where the streak began. I think
then he had the Dong Hun Kim loss.
The Dong Hun Kim, you know, he took some hard. At that point, you got to think he's kind of too big to cut to lightweight. That's a big weight
Mhm.
difference there. And it's like he's way too big for that. Either he gets his papers or he just walks himself. But I don't see him doing much more. He was a huge prospect, and then as always, sometimes these prospects just plummet.
Speaking of plummeting a little bit, that's where Brandon Thatch sits now, as he's lost his last
Exactly.
3 fights in a row, now getting submitted in the 3rd round to Sayer Bahadurzia. And man, I really do like Brandon Thatch. I don't know if he gets cut, but
He's
you
another
know,
one of those dudes having a hard time.
yeah,
finding
he's
his
another
weight
guy
class
that's a
and getting his rhythm.
huge welterweight, and I
But he's
was
a
wondering if that
small middleweight.
affects him.
That's the problem. I think going in the middleweight, I think he's too small for what it is right now.
It could be, but
And well, it's just he can't seem to find his rhythm. He
Yeah.
had some good stuff going on, and then he just dropped some fights that I feel like he shouldn't have dropped. Like Gunnar Nelson. All right, Gunnar Nelson's hit or miss on a certain night. I feel like Brandon Thatch could have beat Benson Henderson if he used his size right, but he didn't.
Yep.
I mean, and then
and that's a fight that was on short notice. So you're like, well, what if he had a full camp to train with?
And then
River
Barbizada,
Benson?
he's been out for 2 years on injury. Granted, he was a top 10 welterweight when he left.
Right.
And so going into this fight, I mean, I had CR kind of picked in my mind, but Thatch is still a banger. But it clearly showed tonight that CR just hasn't really taken much ring rust. He came in just as deadly as he was before. I mean, we'll see what happens. But I think the big story here is Brandon Thatch is just another one of those prospects where he's got to figure out what he's going to do.
Let's get to the main card. Action was started in the women's bantamweight division. Amanda Nunes took on Valentina Shevchenko. Very strong opening rounds for Amanda Nunes. First round, a little slower. You could tell she was kind of pacing herself. And Shevchenko was giving a lot of respect to the Brazilian. In fact, looking at the overall just thrown strike numbers, she only threw 21 strikes. She was being very conservative. She didn't want to do anything to overextend herself and get caught from one of the big haymakers that Nunes is capable of throwing. Nunes, like I said, a little more reserved, just threw 43. In round 2, Nunes started to open up, got an early takedown, got in a couple very dominant positions, came close to finishing the fight with a choke, dominated that round. You could make a case, maybe a 10-8, as she outstruck Shevchenko 43-5 in that round and really controlled the majority of it. And then round 3 started to gas a little bit, and we saw Shevchenko realizing she's probably down 2 rounds to none, had to go for it, really put up the output, outstruck Nunes 41-3, just 11 credited thrown strikes for the Brazilian. Shevchenko also mixed in a takedown, had Nunes in some bad spots, but wasn't able to finish, and kind of maybe coasting, you could say, off the first 2 rounds. Nunes gets another victory in the UFC.
Yeah, and I think that last round going to Shevchenko says more to just a Nunes cardio than Shevchenko actually pulling out a second win. I mean, there's no offense to Shevchenko, but if she was able to do a 3rd round against a healthy, I mean, not a healthy, but like a capable Nunes, then she should have been able to do it for at least one other round. So I feel like Nunes, she just put so much work into those first 2 rounds, and just that 3rd round is easy enough just for her to coast. She lost it, but she still won the fight. I mean, that's the thing, is like Nunes puts a different pace on you. What it says to title contention and everything, I want to see her fight for the title. She's got
Just
a good
because
win
it's a new
streak.
contender.
Exactly. It's a fresh face. It's something different. Probably not going to see it for a minute, considering how we're going to get to about it later. I feel like that's good for Nunes, though. I think what happened that night is a good moment for her to really keep getting a couple more fights.
And it may set up a rematch with Kat Zingano, her only loss so far in the octagon.
Exactly. And Nunes has a lot to show and I think work on, just cardio-wise. I think if I wanted to go for this title fight, I really want her to be ready to go 3 or 4 rounds because, their first 2 rounds were great. 3rd round, though, she seemed a little bit more tired and everything. I understand the output from her first 2 rounds was so intense, but you got to be able to put that output for 3 rounds.
Especially against the ladies at the top.
And I feel like, for a women's division, Amanda Nunes could be really, really, really deadly if she got 3 rounds down solid where she could just put same output out every round. That's bad for any woman in the top 5.
Next fight of the evening, light heavyweight division, Beaston 25, a.k.a. Corey Anderson, took on Filthy Tom Lawler. First round was close, but Lawler landed some bombs there. And since moving up to light heavyweight, he can kind of throw with a little more reckless abandon there. And I thought landing the more impactful strikes gave him round 1 in my eyes. Rounds 2 and 3 were both pretty close, to be honest.
It was a close fight.
It was close. Round 3, though, I thought Lawler, he did get taken down. That was the one round I think for sure you could put in the bank for Corey Anderson.
Yeah, that's all
it was most people thought that Lawler had round 1, Anderson had round 3. Round 2 was kind of the mix. If you look at the striking disparities, Anderson outstruck him 22-11. However, Lawler did have that takedown. It didn't last very long,
right?
But he did have it.
I think that's what cost him. It's like if that takedown would have lasted longer, he probably would have stole the fight. But that's the name of the game. Corey Anderson, I mean, he talked about it. He knew what he was getting into in this fight and everything. He knew he had to pace himself and everything. I mean, with a name like Beastin 25-8, clearly he knows pacing. If he's going, you know, 8 days a week, 25 hours a day. But I think this was a good fight for Corey Anderson, actually.
It was a tough fight against the guy he was supposed to beat that maybe he overestimated a little bit.
And he got caught a couple times. He had his chin tested. And he still showed enough grind out, though, where he was actually able to put some close rounds in there. And that's the thing. And coming back to win the 3rd round was really important for him.
It was. And I think the big thing is not to discredit Corey Anderson or Tom Lawler's performance, but the judges overshadowed this fight and overshadowed the win for Corey Anderson, with 2 judges somehow scoring this 30-27 for Corey Anderson.
Yeah.
And I don't see how you can give Corey 1, 2, and 3. Like we said, for sure, stamp Corey Anderson's name on round 3, but I think it's very hard to make a case that he won the other 2 rounds, especially round 1.
Yeah.
And the one judge you could say got it right there, Marcos Rosales, scoring it a 29-28. I thought this was going to be an easy split decision, but instead it ends up going for Corey Anderson. And I do feel bad for Tom Lawler, but if he can keep up that type of performance, maybe this move to 205 wasn't as bad as people will think.
Not a bad fighter. The thing is, he's always got a puncher's chance. He's not going to get top 10, top 5 probably ever in our lifetime. He may. I don't think he will, but he's still a decent top 15 fighter if he ever, keeps coasting those waters on the outside, because light heavyweight's pretty shallow. He's got power in him, though, and he's always exciting to watch. He's always fun. He always brings it.
I want to see him against Maldonado. I think that'd be a good fight. That's like that's a fun. It was?
Yeah, he's cut a couple months ago. I know.
I'm just saying that would be a fun fight.
That would have been a great fight.
That would have been a fun fight. Now I'm kind of searching for a guy. He technically is coming off a win. Honestly, even though it's a loss, I think OSP Lawler wouldn't be a bad matchup. Or if they want to keep Fei Zhao around, even Fei Zhao, Lawler wouldn't be bad.
There's some good fights for Lawler to take that would just really keep guys on their toes and just keep them in shape, for light heavyweight.
All right, staying with the light heavyweight division, next fight of the evening. Another close one, another not overly exciting. I thought it could be a wild card fight of the night here between Jean Vellante and Ilir Latifi, but another close one. But the difference, you can maybe say, was some takedowns. As Latifi was able, not with great success, but did mix in 3 takedowns out of 12 attempts. The striking numbers almost identical, 36-32 in favor of Latifi, with slightly more output from Vellante, 79-59 in terms of thrown strikes. And really, kind of looking through the round by round, I thought Vellante won the first round. He stuffed the takedowns. I thought both had some nice exchanges there. But then, like I said, in rounds 2 and 3, Latifi was able to mix in a couple of takedowns, and with the strikes being relatively even, that to me was the difference in him getting the judge's nod, was just that threat of the takedown. Even though he wasn't successful with it, really, that threat of the takedown and changing the pace in that way, Vellante couldn't get untied enough to try to uncork some bombs. And once again, Latifi gets the win and continues on this nice roll he's winning. I think maybe gets Corey Anderson next. I think that's a good matchup and really solidifies either guy as a nice new rising star, like you said, a shallow light heavyweight division.
Yeah. This fight was really tough for me emotionally, just because I like both guys. Jean Vellante is a really fun, cool dude. But Ilir, so many people have slipped on Ilir, and I've just been so excited every time he just comes out and brings it. And, even though he didn't come out and just stun the world with a crazy 10, 30-second knockout, he came out there, though, and showed that he can hang for 3 rounds against a guy who's still dangerous. Jean Vellante is not a slouch. And Ilir came out there and he just coasted a nice 30-27. I think that's a fair score for him. I think he did really well to show that he's ready to start moving up a little bit, take ranks. I think if he gets Corey Anderson, I think he'll beat Corey Anderson, which is no offense to Corey, but I feel like Ilir can just put out a little bit more work and just, overall just power and keeping it coasted, as Corey Anderson kind of struggled in that first round with Tom Lawler. That being said, light heavyweight is such a weird division to even talk about because most folks don't even know what's outside of that top 10, let alone sometimes even the top 5. It's hard to name like 10 top 10 fighters in light heavyweight in like an accurate order. So it really only takes another win for Ilir or Corey Anderson to possibly even get a dude up there, even break it themselves. So
let's get to the co-main event of the evening for the UFC's Women's Bantamweight Championship of the World. Holly Holm against Miesha Tate. Round 1, rather a feeling out process between both ladies. Miesha Tate kind of had a little half-hearted attempt, caught a leg kick of Holly Holm. Didn't do much with. I thought she could have followed up a little more on that, but other than that, Holly mixed in a couple of nice kicks and strikes. I thought Miesha landed a couple of nice counter rights, but round to Holly. Round 2, Miesha was able to finally land one of those takedowns, dominated, outstriking the champion 29-1. Came 2 or 3 times close to sinking in that rear naked choke.
So close.
But the round ended. Round 3 came. Tate tried a couple more takedowns, but more of those nice side kicks, body kicks, some nice counters. Maybe you could say Tate kind of backed off a little bit. Rounds 4, or going into round 4, once again, Tate kind of waiting, tried a couple of takedowns, 0 for 2 in that. Holm still showing some nice kicks, some nice counters, and I think heading into round 5, up 3-1, you can make a case for a 10-8 round, but either way, even if Tate wins round 5, it's a draw. Holly Holm gets the title. So going into round 5, Miesha knew she had to do something to either make it a draw or at least go out swinging. And boy, she had to do something. 1 minute went by. She wasn't doing much. 2 minutes went by. Wasn't doing much. And about 30 seconds, she knows a quite coming back from Holly, changes levels, swings around, gets her back, takes it to the ground, and finishes what she started in round number 2 and was able to sink in a rear naked choke for, in my opinion, maybe one of the biggest, maybe not quite Anderson Silva, but pretty close in terms of championship comeback, needing to do something in the final round, coming back and submitting Holly Holm to become the UFC Women's Champion. You know, it's maybe not the way she would have exactly drawn it out, but she did what she needed to do in crunch time to win the belt. And that's what Miesha Tate was able to do.
You know, I mean, first of all, Tate won my respect definitely with this fight. You know, I mean, I've always liked her. I've been crazy about, you know, Tate as a fighter. But she won my respect just knowing that coming to the 5th, her and Caraway, which weird to say, Caraway kind of got my respect for this too. They both knew she needed to get a win that round. Not win the round, but
like get a win. Yeah, like I said, yeah, she had to.
A lot of fighters don't take that opportunity. They choke under the pressure, or they think they can coast it. For some reason, they think they're winning the fight, and they think they can just coast a 10-9 round.
Or they don't have the energy.
Right. If she tried to coast a 10-9 round, she could have either got the 10-9 and lost,
or got a draw, and like I said, still by default lose.
Exactly,
you're not
still
the
by
champion.
default lose. So she went out there and she did exactly what she's always good at, and that's switching it up on anyone she fights. And she came out there and just immediately, when she had the opportunity, took her back and just choked her out cold. Like, just sunk it so deep. Holm didn't have time to tap. She started throwing her fists, and she was just asleep. Very, very powerful win by Tate. We obviously know the blueprint to beat Holm. We've seen it in her fights before against Pennington and whatnot, is that she's not very – against Ronda, her style dominates 10 out of 10 in my opinion.
You either got to make it ugly in the pocket like Pennington was trying to do,
right,
or you got to get the fight to the ground, which so far no one had been able to do. And Miesha showed that
the one to do it in this
she
division,
has holes in her
Tate
game.
And Nunes were like probably the 2 biggest challenges to Holm, in my opinion. And Tate was the one who she put it out there. She did what her skill set was. Good for Tate. She's been trying forever to get a title.
The reason I think it's so incredible is because if you look at the stats, and if someone tells you this fight goes almost to 25 minutes, and if you say Holly Holm stops 7 of 9 takedowns, if I tell you that without telling you how it goes down, you think, well, Holly Holm probably won. That's a good rate. But the 2 takedowns Tate got were super critical. She took exact advantage with those 2.
She made it a 10-8. She shut it down second round 10-8.
And that's what goes to show you the ground thing. It's not, and that's the one thing about takedowns. It's you don't need 5 or 6 takedowns to win the fight. You just need one, and it can change the course of a fight. And Tate proved that exactly. She was actually, if you look at it, she did horrible. She only got 22% of her takedowns. That's not good.
No.
In most fights is not going to get you the win. But what she did with those 2 takedowns and that 22% is what made the fight.
And it's what's crazy about it. It's like the second round, rounds 1, 3, and 4, she flat out lost. Flat out lost.
She didn't.
Second round,
she
got one takedown, made it a 10-8. Even in the 5th round, if that takedown, even if she didn't sink the choke and just choke her out, she could have still made it a 10-8 round easily, and probably would have won the decision at a very weird score of like 48-46, something like, if a 10-8 would have won her the decision, a 10-9 would have made it a draw for her.
Exactly.
So good on Tate. Holmes definitely going to bounce back. It's going to be
It was a close. I mean, it was a close. Like I said, if you say the stats, you say Holmes top 7 takedowns, you think, well, she probably wins.
And this is, in my opinion, that was more exciting than watching Ronda Rousey beat someone in 16 seconds because it was such a crazy.
It had drama. It had the drama. She had to do something.
I was invested. I wanted both women to actually get a win here.
Yeah.
And the one that we thought was going to lose actually pulled the upset. So good for her.
And like I said, like we were talking with Nunes, we'll get real quick to all the situation around it. Opens a lot of interesting avenues for this division, which I feel like they haven't had since Ronda became the champion. Oh, well, I guess going on 4 years ago, she was crowned the champion in 2012. Because you have Misha Ronda 3, you have Holm Tate 2, you have Nunes Tate. You have all, and even though Zingano's coming off a loss, but of course Zingano holds a win over Misha Tate.
You could bounce back pretty easy in this division.
So they have a lot of avenues to go coming up, and I think all of them are viable. Now rumor has it that Ronda wouldn't be ready to go until October. If that's the case, I don't see Misha waiting around to fight Ronda. I think she wants, and I don't think she should have to wait for Ronda.
If she doesn't wait for Ronda, she's probably going to take Nunes. I think that would be the fight there, or maybe I want her and Zingano to have a rematch, but I feel like Zingano needs to get back in the win category real quick, which she could do easily in time for an event with Tate before Tate gets her first defense. It's just right now the matchup to make is either a Holm rematch, which we could see because honestly it was a dominating fight for Holm. You could argue the rematch there. We've seen it argued for less, or Nunes. Nunes, like I said earlier, I feel like she needs a little bit more time to get ready.
And then you could throw in Nunes and Zingano on the same exact card, double women's rematch.
Yeah.
And I think they usually have a Fox card at the end of July. I think that's an excellent fight to put on free TV.
Hey, well, right now in July,
with a good co-main event.
They have 3 events lined up. They have 200, and then before 200, they have Jacek and Glidea, and then the day before that, they have another fight. Card lined up. No one knows what's on that card yet.
And then, like I said, the end of July, beginning of August could be that Fox show. That'll be their 3rd Fox show of the year. It usually goes down in July, August. And I think that's a perfect one.
And they can make a decent card out of it. In my opinion, it still stands. I don't want Ronda Rousey to come back. I don't think she will come back. But if anything was to dissuade her from retiring, it would be Tate winning the belt and being there for her.
And beating Misha a 3rd time.
Exactly.
To get her title
she knows
back.
She can beat Tate.
Absolutely.
But by the time Ronda Rousey's ready to go, there might be Holm back at the helm again for all we know. So who knows what could go on there? I don't think Ronda Rousey wants that Holm fight. And I think that's why she was shying away from ever coming back while Holm was champ. But now that it's not true, who knows what it'll be. Ronda Rousey not coming back opens this division even more, though. So we'll see.
Let's get to the main event of the evening in the welterweight division as featherweight champion Conor McGregor took on former Ultimate Fighter winner and and former lightweight #1 contender Nate Diaz. In the first round, Conor had some nice movement, but the biggest change looking at him as a featherweight as opposed to this fight moving up to basically his natural weight, 168 pounds is what he weighed at. He was leaving his shots out there. It seemed like he was intentionally putting more power behind him. He was leaving his chin out a lot more. Things we hadn't really seen Conor McGregor do in the UFC. Now, was he successful? Yes. Did he outland Nate Diaz? Yes, 32-26. Did he bloody up Nate Diaz a little bit in that round? Yes. Did he take a couple shots in return, though? Yes, he did. In round 2, I felt that Conor was those shots started to kind of add up. And that's the thing about the Diaz brothers, because they hit you with some half power, then they mix in a couple full power. You don't know how hard the shot is coming.
You think they're hitting like pillows, and then suddenly you get hit by a brick and you weren't expecting it.
And you're like, where did that come from?
You know,
and a couple of those counters, like I said, Conor leaving himself out there. And I think the overconfidence, going to have conditioning for days because you didn't have to cut 23 pounds, went away because he was putting more effort into his shots than he normally was saying. And even admitted in his post-fight press conference and speech with Joe Rogan, he was inefficient. And that was absolutely a key in this fight. He was inefficient in his pacing with his newfound weight cutless self. And that kind of haunted him against Nate Diaz, who, you know, he knew he was going to come out slow again. He just fought 2 months ago in a war. He kind of got believed. But again, those counters and stuff started to add up. They started to land on McGregor. It started to affect him. And then uncharacteristically, McGregor shoots in on Nate Diaz. Diaz stuffs it, rolls around, takes the back. Classic, you know, takedown defense 101, and sinks in a rear naked choke and gets him to tap in the second round at 4-12 to win a fight on 12 days' notice against the featherweight champion.
You know, he was super excited for it. You know, shouts out to him for not being here. But I'm going to speak on behalf of him. It's just Diaz is a game dude, and he puts out quality work, and he's especially well-rounded. And this is how I think anyone who acknowledged the fact that Nate could win, this is how it would have went, is that he would have surprised Conor with his reach and power and ultimately got the submission. You know, no one thought he was going to knock out Conor, and he didn't.
He maybe could have, actually.
He possibly could have, and that's the thing. But he definitely, his chance to get a submission was incredibly high.
It was there. You can't not take it.
Yeah, it was.
And
it
he
was
even
right
said
there.
that, too. That's why he doesn't have a lot of knockouts at record, because the submission will open up from his boxing.
Yeah,
He's like, well, I'm
strikers
going to
turn
take
the wrestlers, you know? So my take on the fight is that this was probably, to this date, McGregor's best showing skill set-wise with his striking. However, they would have only been his best showing against a featherweight. If he put the fight he put on the other night, if he would have put that on any featherweight, he would have probably beat Aldo again. He would have beat Edgar. He would have beat any featherweight the other night with the skill set he put on.
Probably because the power
he looked
adjusts
crisp,
to smaller
his power's
guys.
There. He got his range down pretty easy for the first few minutes of the fight. And he was teeing off at will. He knew where to pick his shots. The problem is that he wasn't expecting his power to not translate as well to welterweight.
Yeah, Diaz walked through the shot
Diaz.
too. And because of that, it kind of, like I said, he normally is not throwing that many powerful shots early in a fight.
He's punching up now. He's not punching down on the guy. You know, he's punching up and he's trying to hit that chin, which he was, and he was piecing up Diaz. I mean, it was a clear decision first round for McGregor, and that, I said it earlier on the forums talking about people. His striking was absolutely incredible, and his defense and everything else sucked.
Right.
He came in with a poor game plan. I don't think he realized, you know, moving up to lightweight before over in Cage Warriors, he had success multiple times at lightweight and then enough to even win the championship. But the guy, you know, Ivan, was a small lightweight to begin with in the first place. And then he moved up to a guy who's basically a welterweight, you know, size-wise, height and reach. And Nate Diaz is familiar with fighting a welterweight. I don't think McGregor realized that he was trying to cash a check that was going to bounce.
Yeah, and the good and bad thing about it is it's good because McGregor kind of humbles himself. Maybe he got a little too ahead of himself calling out people in these other divisions, and he can take care of his business at home first before we talk about moving up, a la Anderson Silva. He's a guy that did it the right way. He didn't just win the middleweight title and then go, oh, Rich Franklin and all these guys, they're bums. Right. I want to fight 205. It took several fights, and then when they did give him a fight, they gave him James Irvin. They didn't give him a top 10 light heavyweight.
Yeah, so that's the thing. McGregor's trying to make history and make money right now. I mean, and right now he's going about it the right way.
And I don't have a problem with it, but you gotta slow him down a little bit.
Might have been his best-selling pay-per-view. From how it looked and everything, it probably was. I mean, and if his goal is to make money, which is said it was, that's what it is.
Right.
You know, his goal is to make money and take minimum damage. I personally feel like he gave up the choke. He didn't want to take the TKO punches to the face. I mean, he just rolling over. I mean, if he wanted to sit there, he could have sat on his back and try and bridge out of it and ate the punches. He would have lost.
Right.
But I feel like he didn't want to take the punches. I feel like it's just easy to give the choke because as soon as he did, he just tapped right away. But the thing is, though, I respect that because he already knew he lost. Once he shot for that takedown, which is not his bread and butter, I think he knew he's like,
mentally.
you know what? Yeah, he's like, you know what? Nate's going to beat me right here. Let me just give it to him. And I'm not calling him a quitter, but I'm saying I think he realized, like, hey, you know what? I might have bit off more than I can chew. I've hit this guy with everything I've had. I am now gassed in the second round.
And I'm bloody myself.
And now, just now, he's starting to open up on me. Yeah, I'm in a tough situation. So, you know, McGregor, I definitely feel like these two are going to fight again. Diaz, in my opinion, has earned a shot at RDA.
I think he gets a rematch. And
I think he gets the rematch.
I think he does too.
The problem is here, though, I hope he wins because I want to see McGregor eventually come back up and fight him for that lightweight title because McGregor's still going to try that. Diaz is going to probably want that payday again, and Diaz very well could still win that fight because they're both still would have been a lightweight. They just didn't cut water weight basically for this fight, so it could very easily play out the same way, or McGregor could just be smarter about it, which we wouldn't be surprised. After he lost his fight, he was immediately analytical of why he lost.
Yeah, and the great thing is he already, not to say if he didn't know what he did wrong, he couldn't learn it by going back and watching tape, but he knew right away. Threw too many hard punches. I didn't have the head movement. I was inefficient to the way I approached the game. So he knows what he needs to correct moving forward, and I think that translates even to the featherweight division.
Mm-hmm.
There's just, sure, you can walk away and win fights that way, but eventually that strategy catches up to you, and we've seen guys it's happened to. Chris Lieben was a guy that, I'll walk through this, and eventually punches add up. You may not feel it right away, but it has an effect on you. And that's something he can take moving forward. And like you said, I think Conor, humbled. He's not going to be fighting Robbie Lawler. No. He's not going to be fighting Rafael dos Anjos. He goes back. He defends his belt. Hopefully Frankie Edgar is the man.
It's what it should be.
He talked about maybe giving Jose another shot at the title,
open,
but
it has to be Frankie.
I think unless Frankie, he had some injuries that's prevented him from possibly taking this fight against Conor on short notice, I think we'll be good to go in 4 months for 200. And I think that is still, to me, a very sellable main event because he's still the champion. Nate Diaz, some people are saying Nate against Robbie.
That's silly.
The reason I think it's silly is because, same thing for Conor, there's no shortage of welterweight contenders. There are guys who deserve shots. Carlos Condit deserves a rematch. Tyron Woodley, I feel, deserves a shot at the title. You can make a case that GSP deserves a shot if he decided to return. So, to me, to have somebody else from another division come up and, to me, screw those other guys who have worked hard and beaten tough guys to get to the top of that division, I think would be a shame.
But then it's a double-edged sword because McGregor was doing the same thing. Now, granted, Nate Diaz also isn't the lightweight champ, so there's the precedent, isn't there? There's like a champ moving up to challenge another champ.
You're not. So he's not. Nate Diaz is not holding up the lightweight
and this
division.
isn't me like saying like, oh, Nate, you don't deserve Robbie Lawler. I don't think Nate needs that fight. He against a true welterweight where those guys walk around 200 pounds.
Right.
He doesn't need that fight.
And that's what I mean. He's already fought two top welterweights
he's on a
Rory and Dong Hyun Kim and got dominated in both those fights.
He's got such momentum right now. He can take whatever fight he wants and chooses to tell Dana he's going to go down. He should rightfully try to get the RDA fight because, in my opinion,
maybe he calls out Eddie Alvarez. Nate Diaz is at a point where maybe he had a shot at the title.
Right.
I think he's looking to fight people, and maybe he's like, I already fought RDA. I want to see what this guy Eddie Alvarez. He says he wants to shed the title. Maybe he'll come at me. And Nate, being a guy down for a fight, maybe that gives someone else a matchup. And either way, here's the thing: because of this fight, he becomes super marketable in whatever fight you want next. And that's what's the great thing about you at the UFC.
He's the new Joe Duffy. He's the last man to beat Conor McGregor.
That they can throw him in against any of these guys, and it's a fight that they can sell, and a fight that they can sell more importantly on pay-per-view.
Hey, Diaz right now he's in a good position to start just clearing out that top 10. He's beat Donald Cerrone. I think he can beat Anthony Pettis. I think he can beat Eddie Alvarez. I think he'll beat Joe Duffy, Dustin Poirier. I think he could beat Khabib. I think he beat Ferguson. This isn't me jumping on a Diaz hype train. I've been a Diaz fan since he's been around. This dude was a legit guy. I said before, I thought this was a tougher fight for Conor. I feel like Conor could have beat RDA probably more handily than he could have beat Diaz. And, there's a game plan out there to beat Diaz. The problem is he's a Diaz.
And I felt like but also I feel like the guys to beat him are, with the exception of RDA, who obviously could beat him again, but the other guys that gave him trouble are no longer in the UFC. Gray Maynard, Clay Guida, and Ben Henderson.
Right.
Big, strong, powerful wrestlers that are great with their hips. Those guys aren't around
Yeah.
anymore.
And
The
no
only
offense
one
to
left
Khabib,
is
you're good at
RDA.
Sambo and you're a good ground dude, but that's all you got. And the thing is, Diaz doesn't care. He'll outbox you and just throw you down on the ground. I mean, he'll ride you on top mount if he wants. He's instantly dragging a triangle on you wherever you are. Diaz he's a good fight. He earned this. He really needed this push, I think, to really get him somewhere. I would like to see him just go back down the lightweight and just start taking names, taking dudes out. McGregor needs to go fight Edgar. So that way, if he beats Edgar, I mean, it just hypes up, hey, I beat the former lightweight champ. I can take any of these lightweights out. And that can get that possible storyline going. That's how McGregor operates, is just he runs off storylines. And right now, setting up a storyline for him is beating Edgar and trying to get that rematch with Diaz. This probably is the best thing to happen for both these guys. Diaz gets exposure. He gets money. McGregor, honestly, if he beat Diaz here, you could have argued the RDA fight, but people kind of soured out of that because RDA pulled out. He would have probably got creamed by Lawler. And it's like, he didn't really have a storyline to go with for his last few fights on his contract. This right here opens up a completely different, like, he's now lost. Will he come back a better man kind of thing? This is going to make him a ton of money. And at the end of the day, that's what he's here for. I don't think this hurts any of his casual fans. I don't think people just saw, Diaz do a Diaz thing and just lay out heat and just beat a dude's ass. Pardon my language, but that's exactly what it was that night. And I'm a diehard McGregor fan, but he needed it because he was humble about it. He realized what he needed to do. I think he stepped back. Look what happened after he lost to Joe Duffy. He stepped back. He almost retired, and then he came back and went on like a 13 KO streak. So,
I mean, I don't know if you can see the prop there, but there's Nate. He's right there. He's chilling. He's ready.
Hanging out
He's
right
ready
there.
to go.
He's flexing on me right
His
now,
brother
so.
Nick's. He's ready to go too. So
I mean, this is good for Nate. It's good for the sport. But on top of that, we got a weekend of fights ahead of us. I believe we got a couple cards that we've already covered. I think it's ready. We're time to move on. Without the McGregor, like the sunrise of the next day lying in front of us, I feel like that weight on someone's chest is just like, oh man, when's the next McGregor fight? I feel like that's starting to subside now. It's like it's easier to just really be in the sport without all this emotional craziness going on. I feel like it's just now it's like, okay, you know what? Any night can be any man's day. We've seen that in the past 2 years. Silva lost, Jose lost, McGregor lost. Dudes have just been all over the place. I feel like this is really, really, really good for the sport, just to kind of show like, hey, this isn't like some guy beats everyone and he's invincible. It's like any night someone can just show up and it's their night. And the biggest fight now to see, and that's going to be the most exciting, is seeing Cormier-Jones, because now this really says like Cormier could show up and really just put the work on Jones. And that would be a really big surprise because Jones looks incredibly motivated. But, Cormier's the champ, and he really feels like he's not going to let go of that belt. That dude is down to the bones hateful of John Jones. So I feel like this has just opened up a new era of the sport that's going to be really exciting to watch.
All right, of course, let's give some shout-outs to our friends, our new friends, running the great Facebook blog, MMA Fight Club. So if you haven't discussed the fight already with them and like their page, of course, head over there right now,
Constantly
MMA
active
Fight
over
Club. And they got some great stuff. They're putting up quotes. Of course, they're posting our show. So go check them out and continue the discussion there at MMA Fight Club on Facebook. Of course, AJ Hiller, MMA Signatures USA, the man, the myth, the legend. Anything you need in the memorabilia game, he's the man to call. I have his number on speed dial.
I might need you again.
He's the man to call. MMASignaturesUSA.com. Of course, our partners as well as MMAforlife.ca and MMAinsider.net. Of course, besides watching here on YouTube, please subscribe if you haven't already. YouTube.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. You can also listen to the show on the Stitcher mobile app and on iTunes. He is Colin Camper, running our Facebook page. Like that page, Facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast.
Talk to me,
and of course,
please.
you can follow me on Twitter. Yes, you are. And follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. And also, I've been posting some stuff on Instagram. Of course, that transfers over to Twitter. But if you want to follow me directly on Instagram, at the Jim Gramm on Instagram. Apparently, there was someone else who already had that handle. I was very disappointed because I looked at their page. They only had 2 points. So only 2 posts. And I couldn't get at Jim Gramm. I was very disappointed.
There's a guy in the city. He lays tiles. His name's Jim Gramm. So
very disappointed. Weird. So I added so it's the, so close enough.
That sounds better.
And according to one comment on there, I have no one cares what I'm talking about on Instagram. So that was nice. So I got that. So that's nice to know.
Get your own podcast. Get your own fans.
That was
Come
nice.
on.
The guy's account was protected too, so I'm not really sure what that's saying. As far as I
Protected
know,
from
that's
bullies,
not a real.
that's what it is.
Yeah, not a real person. So also want to give a shout out, and Colin knows this guy as well. Follows him on Instagram and Twitter. Gorilla_the_bear. This dude is an incredible artist. Mainly uses just markers. I think like Sharpie markers. Draws incredible art of MMA. All hand drawn. They're excellent. Follow him on Instagram and Twitter. Awesome dude, awesome drawings. Go check out his work again. Gorilla the Bear on Instagram and Twitter. Wanted to give a shout out to that guy.
Yeah, definitely quality work. So I'd hang it up on my wall.
Yeah, I'm so far I haven't seen him saying he has like a link to sell the works or take commissions, but every time I see a new picture from him, you see 50 comments saying, "Hey, you selling this? Where can I buy this?" So I'm really hoping he starts selling this stuff or digitize it or takes a commission. You know, hey, you want a piece, $50 a pop, and so maybe look into that there, Mr. Gorilla the Bear. So, all right, for Colin Camper, I am Jim Gramm, and once again, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.